Stay more comfortable, more concealed, and in the stand longer with Osseo gear. Premium camouflage apparel created for bow hunters by bow hunters. Osseo's revolutionary patented camo patterns and innovative features are designed to keep whitetail bow hunters totally invisible and dead quiet. Elevate your game with Osseo. Visit asiogear.com and take 20% off your purchase with code TRUTH20. Hey folks, I want to take a minute to give you a heads up about Tethered's latest gear. If you're serious about staying mobile in the woods, you've got to check this stuff out. Now, I've been using their Ultra Lock saddle, and now the SD saddle is available. And let me tell you, this thing is dialed. It's ultra light, super adjustable, and most importantly, it's comfortable. You're not going to be shifting around up in the tree wondering if your legs are going to fall asleep. Pair that with the Predator V platform, which is stable, lightweight, and has an angled front edge for comfort. This thing will give you plenty of room for those critical moments when you need to make a move on a deer. And if you're like me and you spend long hours in the tree, you'll appreciate the new Predator CFX platform. Carbon fiber construction that keeps it light, but tough enough to handle whatever you throw at it. This is the kind of gear that makes a difference when you're out there all day. And listen, if you're always juggling your gear like I am, Tethered's got you covered with the Universal Platform Pack. More rigid to make getting your platform in and out easier, and 2 sizes to fit the smaller and larger platforms. Whether you're hunting public land or heading to your favorite spot on the back 40, this setup makes carrying your platform so much easier. So if you're serious about getting in the game this season and hunting smarter, check out Tethered at tethered.com. Their gear will keep you lighter, quieter, and up in a tree longer, which, as we all know, is where the magic happens.
All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And that lovely mug you see on the other end there is none other than Mr. Bill Thompson, Spartan Forage. What's going on, buddy?
Not much. I thought there was maybe somebody else in the background there because this is like cold face, haven't seen a heater, tired eyes because I'm getting 4 hours a night face. So pretty is not the word I would use to describe this, but thank you.
Dude, you're a handsome fella regardless, man. Cold face, tired eyes.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Tell my wife.
Right. How you been, man? How are things?
Good. Busy, but good. Been traveling all around and promoting the app and building updates. And I'm out here hunting in my cabin. I bought a cabin back that my dad built when I was a kid by hand. And I've had it now for about 2 years, and we've been working on it quite a bit. And we're doing our first hunt camp out of here. So I was pretty excited about that.
Nice. That's awesome. What state are you in?
North Dakota.
North Dakota. Nice.
Yep.
That's awesome, man. I've traveled through North Dakota on my way west to elk hunt, but I've never spent any time there. It's one place I've always wanted to kind of get to whitetail hunt.
Yeah, there's good whitetails out here. It's a little bit different style. Well, depending on, there's so much diversity in this state. Like you can have egg, you can have big woods, you can have prairie lands, you can have the badlands, there's so many different types here, but yeah, it's great.
Right. What type of terrain are you like in, generally speaking?
I am mostly doing big woods and ag.
Big woods and ag.
So there's big woods here. Like, I don't know if I'd call them big woods. They're big woods, but like, just open, monotonous trees.
Mm-hmm.
And then, where you're hunting acorns, you're looking for acorns. And then there's some ag as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say 60-70% of the time it's big woods, and then 30-40% of the time it's agriculture.
Nice. Yeah, I've been ate up with the plains, like the prairie kind of setup. So I would love to come out to that general area and hunt. Anywhere that there's prairie is a place I'm interested in going at this point. I don't know why. Like the open country, having to be able to kind of stay hidden whenever it's not really anything to hide behind is something that I dig. It's just the time I've spent in Kansas, that's kind of where I fell in love with it. So now it's like anytime I can find a reason to hunt off the ground in a ghillie jacket, I try to find it.
Right. Yeah. What I've been doing lately, or my shift that's been happening with me lately, is I used to maybe hunt from the ground 10 or 15% of the time, but now I find myself doing it almost 50% of the time.
Really?
Like the last few bucks that I've killed, my last 2 big bucks actually have both been from the ground. So I've been doing a lot of ground hunting. Yeah.
Interesting. So why is that? Why is it for you? Why the shift? I'm curious. I'll give you my reason, but I'm curious for yours.
Well, let me think. one time, well, most times it's because I was forced into it, but then it became successful. And then I opted towards, doing it. Or it also, sometimes it doesn't set up well, like the trees or the way that the vegetation is. Sometimes you have to go up in a tree because like tonight where Johnny and I was hunting, there was a ton of small like timber growth, like 2-3-year-old trees everywhere.
Yeah.
So if you were on the ground, you weren't seeing anything. You had to get up. But I don't know. I guess I would, if I had to say, like the main reason would be just kind of change it up, just to change it up, but also to just be successful in a different way or have fun in like a different, like, it's fun. The ground's more exciting. You can get close. You can move. Especially when I'm getting into places where I haven't hunted in a long time or I don't know them super well. Like you might decide up 60 yards off and then, you get up in the tree and you look around and you can see where the deer are running. And then you're like, oh, I'm not anywhere near there. And then you got to get down and it takes forever. Whereas if you're on the ground, you have a good cover. You just wait for some wind and make the move. I also have started, again, in the last couple of years, having a lot more fun stalking, like doing stalking of deer. I've stalked doe yesterday. I have a video, I'll probably post it to Instagram tomorrow, where I stalk these does to like 15 yards, 6 of them.
Nice.
And for me, it's kind of like just like a challenge thing. I have a lot of fun doing it. And I was successful on it yesterday. I was hoping that a buck would come in because I was like, I saw just a flicker of a tail and I was like, was that a tail or not? And I sat there with my binoculars forever and looked. Waited for the wind to get right, moved in, and sure enough, there were like 6 does there. And I was like, oh man, a buck's got to come through here and check them. Like it's peak right out here right now. I mean, there's just bucks running everywhere. And waited for like 2.5 hours until sundown and didn't see a single buck. So anyway.
Yeah, that's the rut for you, right?
Why did you make the change?
So at first I started doing it because I was getting ready to prepare to start hunting plain states. And so I wanted to kind of just get more versatile in my setups. And then I started kind of gravitating toward it a little bit because a lot of times, especially, this because you've hunted Pennsylvania before, a lot of pressure. A lot of guys want to be in a stand or a saddle. And so a lot of the places that there's not a tree to get into, guys aren't hunting because they can't get into a tree, And so it just became areas that weren't as pressured. And then the other thing that you mentioned was one of the big reasons why was just, you see that movement 60, 80 yards away. I had this example on, I don't remember what it was, like toward the end of October. I was set up in this area. I saw, a couple of does kind of filter past me and kind of hit this corner into this like corner of this swamp. I was like, all right, cool. That just happened. And then a buck came and checked this scrape line behind me. He walked to that same corner. And then I saw like a decent buck, not one that I was going to shoot. He was borderline. And he walked to that same corner. And I was like, that corner is where I need to be. You know what I mean? I just saw 4 deer go to that same spot within like 2 hours, right? I was in a tree, got down, actually had to head to work, so I didn't get to move. But had I had the whole day and been on the ground, it's like as soon as I saw those first 2 deer do it, or the 3 deer do it, I could have just shot over there and been set up and on the ground and ready to go, and if that next deer that came through was a shooter, then I would have had an opportunity, Yeah. And so that's one of the big reasons. And then the other one was I just had a goal when I started going to the plain states that, because there's trees I could have got into that while I was out there. But the deer I shot last year in Kansas, like my goal was to shoot one on the ground in open country in the plains. Like that was my goal, was just to prove to myself that I could get close enough to a mature whitetail on the ground and get it done, And so, and then once I did, it's like, once you do it, you probably had the similar experience. Like once you do it, it's a hard bug to get rid of because of how exciting, like the close encounter and how like tense everything is when it all kind of goes down.
Yeah. And the deer right in front of you. And like, just also, I think maybe like 10 or 15 years ago, there was always this like mantra where everyone would talk about how you can't beat a deer on the ground or you can't stalk a whitetail.
I think you can almost get away with a lot more on the ground. I feel like I shouldn't say anywhere.
No, the wind, you can, I think if you really understand wind well and you're paying attention to the wind, you can get away with a lot more than you think, especially if it's windy.
Yeah.
Like for me, anytime now there's above a 7 to 10 mile an hour wind, I'm almost always stalking. And that's probably really reckless to say because maybe some people will, try the same thing and mess it up. But I mean, as long as you're willing to learn and like just move way slower than you think you should, and always have your steps planned, and always like examine the ground, make sure you're not stepping on sticks. But the most important thing for me, or like the biggest learning curve for me, was knowing exactly what your next tree that you're moving to is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're set with like watching the does, they're all looking away or they can't see you. And then, or the buck or whatever it is you're stalking. Like last year it was a buck when I killed that mountain buck. And then picking the next tree and then thinking about what your back cover is going to be when you get to that tree. And then thinking about what your shot lanes are going to be. And then you might say, because someone might be like, oh, there's a really big tree there. But then you see the big tree and then you realize, oh, there's nothing behind it or there's no back cover. So if you try to move out on one side or the other, you'll silhouette. Meanwhile, if you've got like a group of 3 trees that are thinner, that might be the better choice. And then you kind of get in between, and then you can get away with a lot more that way. So it's fun. It's a game of cat and mouse. I've killed lots of deer from tree stands, and I still will. Like tonight I hung in a tree stand. And but tomorrow it's supposed to be snowing and raining and windy. So more than likely that's going to be a stalking day for me.
Right.
And I'll be out here with, Johnny Stewart, who he can just look at a whitetail weird and it'll fall over dead. So if I have that guy with, I think I'll probably be doing pretty.
I laugh, but we all know that there's a lot of truth to that statement.
Yeah, there is. Yeah. You have to look at him and go, how? Like that.
I know, right. I know, right. But I think what you said, there's a lot. I think that you're right, because that was one of the things that the cover thing is huge, right? Like picking, moving from tree to tree, if you're in open country, moving from shadow to shadow or bush to bush or whatever the case is. And then always trying to, the other thing I picked up, especially when you're in the plains from my buddy Travis Glassman, and he kind of taught me this, was like always trying to have the sun to your back. That way the sun is in the deer's eyes as you're trying to approach them. Because it's the same thing. Like if we're moving towards something and the sun's in our face, like you can see maybe there's something there, but I can't really make out what exactly it is, and I can't really see it move. And so it's that type of stuff. But the biggest thing for me is like, I felt like I could get away with more like cheating the wind a little bit, because I'm kind of saturating the ground in front of me, like close to me, but I only really need that deer to get within like 20 yards of me. And so, you know what I mean? So as long as like the wind's not blowing directly to them, I feel like it's kind of hanging out around me to a degree, as opposed to like being in a tree and like having swirling wind and it's like ripping 150 yards away from me that I don't know exactly where it's landing. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then especially in like grass in the plains, I felt like I could get away with so much more movement and noise, like noise from movement, because that grass acts as such a buffer to noise. Because I figured it out as they were approaching me, because I was like, good Lord, I can't hear them until they're like right on top of me. And then I was like, well, that works for me too. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm able to get a lot closer before they can actually start to hear me, because of the wind and like the grass rustling and like the grass actually acting as a buffer of like sound. It's just absorbing the sound before it gets to them. So, but yeah.
The other thing too, I find, and this isn't like 100% true, like I would have to ask someone else about this, but because I've never like read studies, or I've never talked to Johnny about it, or like an Andy May or someone else about it, but I find they're a lot more responsive to calls that come from the ground too.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like if I'm up in a tree and I'm blasting a call or whatever, or if I'm blind calling, the only place I really have success blind calling would be like PA. I don't blind call a lot of other places, although I say that, and I blind called a couple of times here, but it's out of desperation more than anything. And a lot of success with blind calling. Like I'll have bucks come in on a string to a blind call. But when I'm on the ground and I'm calling, or I'm moving, or if I'm going through like a thicket and I'm like just doing like a little like tending buck grunt as I go through there, I'll have bucks right in on a string on that, because to them that's like,
that's just another deer.
It's just another deer. And they might even see movement, and that might even help them out. Like think, oh, there's something there, because how many times have we just seen the faintest amount of movement and then we think, oh, deer, and we look and it's a squirrel tail or something like that, So that of course is not empirical. I have no way to prove or say that's 100% true, but I definitely find like that buck I killed last year in PA, that big mountain, he was 10 or 12 years old. That guy was like working a drainage with another doe, and the doe shot past me, and I was like, oh crap, I just spoiled this hunt. Like, what happened? But I could still see his antlers in the drainage, and I called the first time, and he just kind of like stopped and looked around, and then I did like a much longer, more aggressive call, and then I saw his fur on the back of his neck stand up, and he walked up out of that and came right to me. And that was ground calling, and
nice. Yeah, I mean, I think when you can make it, the more real you can make it for them, I think the better off you are, right? Like, I learned a little bit of that. Last year I did some decoying while I was out in the plains, and I only decoyed one buck in. I didn't need it for the one that I killed. And I used it on a deer because I wanted to see, it was a deer I knew I wasn't going to shoot, but I wanted to see what I could get away with, because my buddy who turned me on to it, he has a ton of success and kills freaking giants with it. And my biggest concern was like, how much movement can I get away with? Because I was just using like a heads up decoy, right? So it's just I made like a mount for it that's on like basically a electric fence post with like a metal pole at the end of it, so I can step it into the ground real quick if I needed to pop it up real quick, Huh. And so you don't have anything really covering you, right? Because you're kind of sitting off to the side of it. And I asked him, I was like, man, how much movement can I get away with? I was like, because I feel like I'm kind of naked with that thing. Because, he was like, man, he's like, you'll be surprised with how much you can get away with. He was like, because they're so focused on that deer, like the head, that the movement around them, as long as you stay relatively close to it, he's like, I think that they just feel like it's the natural movement of like what the deer's body would be doing. He was like, again, to your point, he's like, I don't have any way to necessarily prove it. He's like, but I've gotten away with so much, because he self-films from the ground with a camera, like by himself, and like kills giants.
That's aggressive.
And so I had that buck that I saw from like 80 yards away or whatever, and I gave him a little burp and like plopped that decoy up, and he was like, saw it and started walking into it, and I stepped it into the ground, and I got on my knees, and I have my bow, and I wasn't going to kill him, but I wanted to see, could I get drawn, and how much could I move, and how close. That deer got to 5 yards and was like looking at it, and I was moving the decoy as he was moving around, and I got to full draw on it, and he never moved until I stood up. And I stood up because I wanted him just to leave, because there was a deer in the area I was trying to kill, and I didn't know if that deer was going to be around. I didn't want him being there spooky if that other deer showed up. And it wasn't until I completely stood up that he actually took off, and that deer was dead for 4 minutes. Wow. And I did all kinds of moving. It was crazy. I couldn't believe how much I got away with that thing.
Yeah, Johnny killed his buck yesterday from 8 yards. And then when does this podcast air?
It'll be out on the week of next week. So the week of Thanksgiving, like Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, I think.
I'll spoil a little bit of news here, but Lee Ellis just killed what was, Johnny, would you say, 180 inches? 170, 180, public land, Oklahoma whitetail. Nice. From the ground. It's so much shit from people. Lee, I'll say it. Lee, I would put Lee, Johnny, and Andy as probably the 3 best whitetail hunters I've ever met. And I've met all of them. I've met the big guys, all the names that you would think about. A lot of them hunt big farms. I've got nothing against that. I'm trying to start a big farm of my own. Like, I want a big farm of my own. Like,
but all it doesn't, right?
Yeah. All I'm saying is, when you talk about like guys who can go anywhere and get it done, those 3 names, and Lee gets so much shit because people say like, oh, you pay for deer, or you do this or that, or blah, 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 blah. I've spent a lot of time hunting with that guy, and he hunts as hard as Andy or Johnny, and does it in more places. And also, people seem to forget, like, he's got videos where he's killing them on egg in Kansas, where he's killing them in the big woods in Pennsylvania, where he's killing, and now he's just arrowed this. He just went in and did like I think he was there for 5 days in Oklahoma, and just killed 170, 180 inch whitetail from the ground. And the photo that I have on my phone he sent me is unbelievable, because he's at like full draw, and he releases, and it's raining, and all of the rain is coming off of both sides of his bow. As the arrow is like cutting through the air at this 180 inch, it's probably 10 yards away from him or something like that.
That's crazy.
So again, on the ground. So maybe we're starting a revolution here. Maybe there's a ground revolution going on.
Yeah, man. I think, I think I don't want to. I think that a lot of people probably moved away from it because I think conventional wisdom was if you can get into a tree, you do it. And look, I think there's a lot of merit to that. I think if you have the right cover and stuff like that, you can stay concealed. I think that you can see usually a little bit further and stuff like that. But I think hunting from the ground, if you know what you're doing and you know how to get set up, I think it's one of the most lethal ways to kill deer. And get close. And I think it's also a way to get into spots where deer want to be because the pressure's not there. I think that's one, especially in pressured states. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. I agree with you there. There will, of course, be places where you need to be in a tree.
For sure.
And there will be places where a saddle works better, and there will be places where a tree stand works better.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying like there's just one ring to rule them all. We just need to be doing this one thing.
I think people got so, they get so narrowly focused on that it has to be done this way, or this is the way that I have to do it, right? I think they're all tools, right? Like, hunting it off the ground, is a tool, right? You could say it's a strategy, but it's really a tool because it's just really how you're setting up. And a tree stand or a saddle, those are all just tools for the job, right? And you pick the right tool for the right circumstance, right? So sometimes you should be on the ground. Maybe a stand is ideal for a certain setup for some reason, or maybe a saddle is, or whatever the case is. I think the less rigid you are, and I think this is just in anything, right? The less rigid you are, and the less the less things you hold precious, the better off you are, right?
Yeah.
Because you're open for possibilities.
Yeah.
What's that?
And the quicker you can learn and quicker you can adapt. I think so. In the military, we always talk about, and I think about hunting like a military person, because being a military guy is what I was since I was 17. I was a military guy. But we always talk about like, don't react to a battlefield, shape a battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
Like choose where the fight's going to be. Understand your advantages, what you have for you. Understand the enemy's advantages, what they have going on for them. It's cliche, but in this term, it's whitetail. Like what does the whitetail have over you? They can smell anything. Mm-hmm. So you need to have the wind. And you can do some things for scent reduction, but at the end of the day, if the wind's not on your side, you're having a hard play, right? Mm-hmm. But then someone can do something like, well, now I'm going to, Andy does it. I know Johnny and I have talked about it. I talk about it. Playing like a slightly off wind. If you're confident in the forecast and you know what the wind's going to be, use that buck's nose against him and play. If a south wind works and you're getting if a southeast wind works for the stand, and a south or a south, or a east doesn't work and it has to be that southeast, then play that southeast wind, make him think that he's safe or where he's walking into is safe. And in that way, you're shaping the battlefield, or you're mm-hmm. you're taking an advantage that the whitetail has or thinks that he has, and you're using it against him. In that you're playing this slightly off wind, and now, he's more confident than he would be. So shaping the battlefield, I think, is, if you have private land, it might be that you create some advantageous bedding by doing some hinge cutting in some places where he can't scent check it as well as he'd like to before he goes in there. Or if it's public and you're choosing certain types of terrain, or you have a weather forecast, when they're, I know, maybe Andy doesn't want me saying this. Maybe I've heard him say it on podcasts. It doesn't matter. I'll say it here. You heard it here if you've never heard it before. I know I do it, and I know Andy likes doing it, and I know Johnny does it. They like to see a wind shift throughout the day. So if they know a buck is on a particular point, and, when I look at the GPS data, I've said this since the beginning, the highest predictor for midday buck movement is a dramatic wind shift. The buck will react to that wind shift and readjust his bedding so that he keeps the advantages. So we have, weather forecasts.
Yep.
So if the wind's going to switch from a south to a northwest, and he's in here on this point overlooking these does or the scrape or whatever, then choose this stand and say, all right, when I see that, I'm going to wait on the ridge. When that wind shift happens, I'm going to move into position very quickly and anticipate that buck's going to be moving his bed. In fact, I think that's how Andy just killed his last deer.
I was just going to say he killed that deer I guess it was just like a week ago, actually. I think, if I'm not mistaken, He killed that deer on a wind shift. Like, he was set up, waited. He knew it was going to shift. He said there was he was hunting a different spot. He said the wind was shifting like some point during the day. When it started to shift, he got down and moved to a drainage where that he knew that deer liked to use, and hopped into, got into a set. I don't know if he was in a tree or if he was on the ground for that one, but got into whatever the setup was on that wind shift. And then when that wind shifted, that, half hour before dark, that deer popped out.
And now you've shaped the battlefield. And that's what I mean by that, right? You're like, you're, it's like, the age old cliche, or the thing that we always do in the military was we talked about the hot gates at Thermopylae with the Spartans, and the Spartans, had a inferior force of, I think, about 13,000, I think it was, soldiers. And they were fighting what historians think was like a 500,000 to 1 million strong Persian army. And they said, all right, how do we take their advantage, which is size, and use it against them? Well, we make the battlefield take place between the ocean and a cliff, where the fighting force on force fighting area is only like a few hundred yards. So only so many soldiers can fight at a time. Mm-hmm. So now you've taken their strength and you've created a backlog of soldiers, and only so many can get to the front. And you've taken your ability to have a better fighting force and smaller, and you've put them in this narrow pass. And now you can cycle through soldiers who have superior fighting ability, and you can kill more, in this case, the Persians, and they can't send any more forces to bear because there's no way around an ocean and there's no way around a huge cliff. So you've shaped the battlefield. So I won't talk about that anymore, but it's something I always think about it whenever I'm trying to hunt whitetails. How do I set this area up so that whatever the advantages this animal thinks it has, I'm using it against them. And of course, what comes from that, or the thing first that you need to understand, is how do I understand my enemy? My target in this case, not your enemy. Right. How do I understand it? And do I know it? Do I have the intelligence in order to set the battlefield up in a way that's advantageous for me? Or am I just walking in blind and hoping to get lucky? Yeah. The guys that I all look up to, the deer all check under their beds for Johnny Stewart's and Andy Mays. They know everything about these before they get in there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, good advice for people as they're, trying to put the plan together.
Yeah, I love that phrase, shaping the battlefield. That's such a great way to think about it, right? Because you intuitively try to do it, but if you use those terms, right, it becomes a lot more. What you're trying to accomplish becomes a lot more clear. Like if you think of it in those terms, right? It's like I'm trying to shape, what they're going to do, right? I'm trying to shape the battlefield, or whatever it is you're doing. If you're playing football, you're doing the same thing, right? If you're doing jiu-jitsu, you're doing the same thing. You're trying to shape
for sure.
Yeah, you're trying to force your opponent into making the mistakes that you want them to make to execute whatever, submission techniques you're trying to use on them, at that time. So
yeah, like, this guy's a good striker, I'm going to go to the ground right away. As soon as we can get to the ground.
Yeah, you don't stand up and strike with them if you're not a good striker too,
Go with Conor McGregor, right?
Right.
Let's roll. Let's get to the ground. I'm going to,
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's just another way to think about it. And I think it's another way to do like that variable analysis that all hunters should do when they're trying to account for all of the strengths and weaknesses, and how do I offset them or create a situation where I'm in the advantage.
Yeah, I'm curious, man. I wanted to ask you, and I wanted to get to this a little bit later, and we'll talk about some Spartan Forge stuff here as we go. But I wanted to ask you, because as we're talking about shaping the battlefield, it's a great segue to kind of talk about the app for a quick second. Like, what are the features that you most frequently use? Like, I know the ones now over the course of time that I've been using it, that I kind of rely on most often, and I'm curious the ones that are kind of like your go-to.
The for sure first one that I always look at is the historical wind. So I always go to the area that I'm going to hunt or scout. And it all starts with scouting. And I go to that intel tab and I look at the historical wind. What are the majority winds in an area? Like Garrett Prawl, who had just left today, was here hunting too. And he does the same thing. We pop up the historical wind plots and we say, okay, in this area, it's, 60% of the time it's a northwest wind. It's a south wind today. And again, then so you're looking at it and you're saying it's a south wind today. How often is it a south wind in this area? And then you look at the historical wind, you say not very often. So what does that mean? That means the deer are going to be moving in a way that they're not used to. or scent checking areas are moving differently in a way that they don't understand. So now you've got a tactical advantage.
Yes.
And the fact that you know it's going to be a south wind is an advantage that you have over the deer. So for me, it's for sure, every time it's the historical wind. After this historical wind, it would be the LIDAR. If I'm in any kind of like flat or non-flat area, I'm looking at LIDAR. I'm putting slope angle on top of it. I'm looking, where Johnny just killed his buck. There was a bench that was very prominent in the LIDAR, and he used that to his advantage to move in there and set up just off that bench and kill that buck. And then after that, I would say it's historical imagery. So we've just dropped historical imagery for all of the US. It used to be we just had it with the UAV layer or like the high resolution, but now we've got it for all of the US. And that historical imagery to me is really important because you can see the age of cuts. You can see how the land's changed over time. You can also see the same piece of land at different times in the year. So in the historical imagery, spring, you might have summer, you might have winter. And then you can examine, see what are the trees that are holding foliage throughout the winter. What are the trees that are going to lose it first? What are the different cuts? What are the ages? When was this one cut? And then and with that, you start to understand the transition and where the transition areas are. Where if you're looking at static imagery or imagery that doesn't change over time, you won't know those things until you get on the ground. And even then, it might be you're scouting 10,000 acres. You might have to walk that place for a couple of weeks before you find all that transition. But what I do is, in my app where I hunt regularly, I just draw measuring lines over all of that transition and leave them there. And I just know that my measuring lines are transition lines. So when I'm flipping through different map instantiations, whether it's the LIDAR layer or whatever else, those are still there. So now if I see an area where there's lines, I never use lines for measuring.
That's awesome. I never thought of that.
Shapes. We're going to make it so you can just do arbitrary shapes. But for now in the app, we don't have that. We'll have it this summer probably. So you'll be able to just draw a line and color it however you want. There won't be a measurement. But I draw those transition areas, and then I'll go and flip to the LIDAR, and I'll say, oh, look here, you have a topographic funnel, and you have transition on the west side of that funnel, that bench. So now not only do you know that there's a bench that they want to work, but there's transition on the west side of that bench. And that will be 9 times out of 10 where a buck will want to work and come in or come out of. Or if he wants to scent check, if you've got a wind that's coming across and he wants to scent check, he's going to be scent checking it from the more dense foliage. So I leave those lines on the map, and that's what I'm going through whenever I'm looking at it. So I'd say those are probably my top 3. And then from there, I'm a prolific user of the prediction. And I just got a message this morning from a guy who was like, the prediction has been spot on in my area, like 100% spot on. And that was one of the first things that we built, and I still use that all the time. So yeah, I'd say those are probably my top 4 things that I'm using all the time. And then after that, it's mostly based on where I'm hunting or what else is driving the intelligence. What are the other variables that I need to understand in order to piece it together? And then from there, it might be something like the agriculture layer or land ownership or just understand, like just today, Johnny and I were looking at the public land layer, and then we turned on agriculture. Then we're driving around and we're looking for where there's still corn or cut corn or corn that's being harvested now. So it's like a dinner bell for deer.
Right.
And then we're finding public that lines up off of that. And then we're throwing on the LIDAR and the historical wind. And then we're putting it together, and we move in on the ground, and we make a move in an area where we've never been, where because we have all of those things, we've just eliminated like a week or 2 of scouting on the ground, and we can just move into a spot and set up whenever we're trying to run and gun, because the wind's been weird and from all kinds of directions here. Like we've had a south wind for the past 3 days, which this time of year where I'm at in North Dakota, it's mostly west and northwest.
Right.
And it's finally going back to that tomorrow because we're supposed to get snow. So,
Nice.
and also the deer are on edge. Whenever we get these weird winds in North Dakota, I don't know if it's everywhere, but definitely here, they just act different. They act weird, like they don't like what's going on, and actually it's weird. It's actually something I remember my grandfather saying when I was a kid, like, south wind today, things are going to be weird. It's like a really old way of talking. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like a farm almanac way of talking.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
south wind, things are going to be strange today. I got a deer killer behind me here. I feel like he's
I just saw him. He's
pull up my
creeping.
bed and take me out. Now he's getting another beer.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we got him outside right now. Big 140. He took down on public yesterday.
Nice. I think what I use most often is the historical. Use that for sure. And then LIDAR is probably my second favorite. Like that deer I'd been chasing, one of the puzzle pieces that I got was I had an idea of where I scouted this area, and I was like, man, this area sets up really well. I wanted to hang a camera in there, and I wasn't quite sure where to, and so I was looking on my map, flipped it to LIDAR, and it's an old clear cut, like one of those ones. It's like just super high stem count. All the trees are like 15, 20 feet tall, pole timber type stuff, right? But just super dense. And you can't hunt inside of it. You have to hunt kind of the edges of it. And then I flipped LIDAR on it. I could see an old logging road that was overgrown when I walked in. I mean, I couldn't see it when I walked in, but I could see it when I flipped LIDAR on. Like I could see like the flat area. I was like, man, that looks like a old logging road. And so I hiked to it. And sure enough, like I could just see enough of like how it was graded to where it was just like flat enough to like, yep, you can tell there was an old logging road there. And so I ended up following that down, made a mock scrape, hung a camera, and boom, that's where I got that big deer on camera to kind of confirm, because I thought he was living in this general area. And then I got the confirmation. And that was like the thing that actually gave me that puzzle piece was that. So that's definitely like probably my second favorite kind of piece to use. Man, I love that idea of marking those transitions with the change of foliage over time, right?
Yeah.
And then using those lines to mark that, like, because that's the one thing that's like I'll flip back and forth between, like the regular UAV or whatever and to LIDAR, and I'm always like, oh, where was that transition line at again? And I'll go back and I'll look and flip back and forth. Dude, it's so smart just to make a line there, and it's like, duh, it's right there, right? Such a good idea.
Yeah, I've got updates coming out for next year too that I don't want to talk about because our competition is starting to copy us. I think I just saw the other day Onyx is coming out with a LIDAR layer, which isn't really copying us. I mean, LIDAR has been around, but I'm just saying like I'm starting to see moves that we're making, other people are coming with. But I've got something next year that I think is going to be awesome on the LIDAR layer, where we're going to have some very useful overlays that I don't think people have thought about.
Nice, that's awesome. Speaking of the competition, right? I'm going to make an awkward segue, man. I saw you on Fox and Friends, man. You're like now you're like a TV star and shit now, dude. What's up? Like I
wouldn't go that far.
You got the hair flow now and everything, dude. I saw you on there like with the slick back.
Yeah, they did that to me. My hair doesn't really flow, as you can see. It's been under this baseball hat, but we did.
No, it was awesome to see you on there, and I mean, not that you needed my approval, but you did a really good job. Yeah, I was stoked for you.
It was such a weird type of interview, dude. Like I spent a couple of days prepping for it because it's very like we're going to have 5 to 7 minutes. Like it's going to be questions. You need to put as much information in there. You need to be as information dense as possible without talking over people's heads.
Right.
So like there's a really weird, like fine line that you have to walk whenever you're doing that. So I spent like 2 days preparing with my wife for it. My wife really is the great communicator. We just like between her and then some of my marketing people, we just kept going back and forth because, 4 million people watched Fox and Friends that morning. Mm-hmm. So you have to awesome. You really need to, the only time you're getting numbers bigger than that is if you're going on Rogan or something like that, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
At least in 6 minutes, you know what I'm saying? Like 6 minutes, 4 million people will see this.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time just like not overlooking the moment, and we looked into it because people out in North Carolina, we reached out to people who are doing assistance on the ground in North Carolina after the flooding, and said, hey, like we got stories where they were having a hard time coordinating, where they were dropping water, where there were blocked roads, where all of these events were happening, and they wanted to be able to share among a bunch of people. And the second thing they were having problems with was the mapping in the area, even Google was very old, but we had UAV imagery from a week before the flood happened. And then we had LIDAR imagery. So they were trying to get like, a road was washed out and they were trying to get up to a road. They actually, and a lot of times would find on the LIDAR layer, old logging trails that they could get up with like, an e-bike or, an old 4x4 or something and get people in or deliver people. In one case, I was told a crew got some guys to the hospital, like an old guy, I think had diabetes or something. They used the LIDAR layer to get to get up a back road to this guy's like mountain home and get him to the hospital. So, Fox News, they'll gravitate towards that type of stuff when it's like, oh, veteran started company, person provides, free, I think we did 230 free apps. But then the other thing they were able to do is using our Blue Force tracker. They just drew a huge Blue Force tracker team around the area. And then they said, oh, this road is taken out. This road is out. Here's an alternate route. Here's where we're doing water drops. Here's where we're doing a casualty collection point. And then they were using hunting pins and stuff inside of the app to mark all of these spots. And then Blue Force was automatically sharing it with everyone on the team. So it was a good success story. And then, somehow Fox News picked it up and asked us about it or reached out to us. And then that led to me being able to go out, take my family to New York and going on to the show one morning.
That's awesome, man. Like it's crazy that, all the time you spent in the military, and then you build this app I know you started it while you were still in the military, but like, as now you're a civilian, right? Technically speaking, I guess. In that that was actually being used in almost like a military kind of circumstance, you know what I mean? Where it's like, it was very much like an intelligence gathering communication platform that's crazy, man. I mean, I know you love helping people kill deer. Don't get me wrong, right? I know that's something you love. I know you love seeing people, have success and helping hunters find success more quickly, especially if maybe they don't have a lot of vacation time, like they're going short time and they're able to use your app to kind of, help them, kill a good deer or kill the deer they want to kill or kill a deer in 2 days because they only have 2 days of vacation or whatever. I know that makes you feel good, or you like to see that. I can't imagine how it makes you feel to know that like something that you made is actually helping people, like humanity, like helping people in survival and stuff like that.
Where otherwise it would have been an impossible situation or a much more difficult situation. Felt really good. Yeah, like, and we gave all those free apps. We gave all those apps away for free and provided them to all the people who came in and relieved afterwards. And they had nothing but like shining reviews and said, things were great and it really helped out. And we got some stories and stuff. And we'll be sharing those over the next few months as things kind of cool down. But nice. I think it's, still my highest value is always like, a father-son team getting their target buck or somebody saying, they got venison on the table for their family. But in that regard, it was something I couldn't have predicted where we were able to help people out and feel good about ourselves. And, it was great.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So I'm curious, dude, you've been, in the civilian life for a little while now, right? A couple years, had the company for a couple years, running the business and, obviously pursuing your passion for hunting. I'm curious now when you think about the past several years and like the transition that you kind of went through, right? And, just, the experiences that you've had, like like having to kind of balance, running a business in the space along with like trying to get out to hunt and stuff like that. Like what are some of the lessons that maybe you didn't predict that you would learn or things you would figure out or experience or learn or whatever the case is the past couple of years? What are those things that maybe struck you as like, wow, I didn't think I would experience this, or I didn't think I would feel this way about this, or I didn't think that this would happen, or, something along those lines. Is there anything that kind of strikes you? Or maybe it's something that you learned,
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of things we could do a whole different podcast on this alone. I guess the first thing I would say is if you're going to start a business in the hunting industry, say goodbye to efficient hunting. Like I don't have the time to like all of my February and March, all of my September, October used to be devoted to scouting. All I would do is scout. That was it. Like I would spend all of my time out scouting and if I had a free hour, I would go and scout. And if I had an area I wanted to go check out, I'd go and scout. I have almost no time for that anymore. And even out here in North Dakota, I'm relying on spots like Johnny and I were just talking about going to a spot where I killed a 140 like 10 years ago. Because I haven't been able to get out here and scout. So actually the guy who said it to me in the very beginning was Levi Morgan. He said, if you really love hunting and now you're in the hunting industry, he's like, you can say goodbye to like hunting for a while because your peak time or when you're doing everything or when you're the most busy is during hunting season. And that was absolutely correct. So, I mean, I've had to sacrifice the quality of hunting and my preparedness just because I'm trying to get this app out there. And so I kind of think of it as like I'm helping other people become good hunters now. So that should be the reward. And that is the reward. Like like I said, I've gotten messages over the past few days where guys are killing bucks and sending me stories, or I get almost 3 or 4 messages a day about the prediction being accurate or spot on, or somebody using, like you said, the LIDAR layer to locate a place or historical wind or whatever. The journaling and looking up historical weather in the journal, a lot of people message me about that too. So that all feels great, but it leads to me either not having the time to prepare myself for hunting or spend the time that I want to hunting. Like this has been the first time in a few years where I've been able to, and I'm still working the whole time. Like I'm answering messages, I'm taking calls with like a Bluetooth ear piece in. But I have been able to hunt morning and night now for 3 days, and I'll be able to do it now for the next 3 days. And that'll be it for the year for me. So I'm hoping to get up, if it's 100 inches or bigger, arrow's going to fly.
Right.
Because I'm not picky anymore. I used to be very picky about the deer or wanting to target deer, or that's not the case anymore. Like I just don't have time for it. So it's become a lot more about that. But then,
but you also get the surprise of something just walking around the corner that maybe you aren't aware of, right? Like there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yes, 100%. You're very correct. Like I'm hunting spots now where I'm like, I have no idea what might be coming out of those trees. And that is a lot of fun. And then also putting it together and just challenging yourself. Like I've killed, I don't know how many, 15, 17, 130, 140 plus bucks. So it's not as if I need to prove myself anymore to myself and say like, I know how to deer hunt. Like I feel like I know how to deer hunt. So now it's just about like the next challenges, which is, I've been doing the ground hunting. I've been going into a lot more places blind or just trying to put it together, right before I go in there on public or whatever. So that's been, an adventure all of itself, and it's a different way of hunting, and the success is lower, but you're also having a lot more fun, and the pressure's not there either, because I used to be like, oh, I'm waiting for this buck, and when's this buck going to show up? And I killed myself in the past doing that. I was chasing this like 180, 190 inch Maryland buck like 5 or 6 years ago, where every sit was devoted to that buck. And I also knew I probably wasn't going to see a lot of other deer. And I was longbow hunting at the time and sent an arrow right under him and never saw him again. He got hit by a car. But, while I was in Afghanistan, but, that was that. And then the other thing that I guess has kind of been, dude, I could talk about startups. Like I've learned so much about startups and companies and entrepreneurship, and like what investors and people want to see, or what the market wants to see, or efficiencies. Like I just like, I've been a vacuum for it for the past 4 years now. So I can really talk about it all day long. The other thing that has really surprised me, I guess, and I'm not trying to slander our own here, it's just people are very, very, very judgmental of others and what others are doing, and they're not concerned about themselves. And look, before I started Spartan Forge, I didn't have a social media for this reason. Like if you look at the Spartan Forge Instagram, if you look at my personal Instagram, they're all started in the last couple of years. I didn't go on there because I always saw it as like a cesspool and as a distraction. But as we were going, my marketing team was like, look, you need to be online. You need to have a social media presence. You need to be out there. Like you are the product. People are going to associate. People don't want the faceless companies anymore. Like we've been seeing that in the US, where there are these big organizations where it's just an app, or it's just a product. You don't know who's making it or why they made it or where it's made. And it's like people are tired of Chinese crap sold by faceless corporations. They want to know that the people that are building these products are behind them, that they're part of the culture. So I understood that. And, I launched the social media and started doing all of that stuff. But the thing that has surprised me, and I had no contact points on, because when I got into hunting, it was because my brother-in-law did it, and he was my single source for hunting.
Yeah.
Like anything I had questions about, I just went to him. I didn't go online. I was never part of like a rock slide forum or a bow hunter forum or none of that stuff. So when I had a question about bow hunting, I went to ask him because he was a good bow hunter. Or I thought about it myself, and I have an engineering mindset, so I try to put it together myself. But the biggest problem I think that I didn't expect with the hunting industry is people are just super concerned with judging other people and how they do things. And it wouldn't have been something that I would have expected out of an industry where we're trying to do something for ourselves on our own. Like we're trying to go out and get our own meat, trying to hunt our own land, or we're trying to do it ourselves by knocking on doors or by hunting public or whatever. And just the amount of judgment and aspersions and just shittiness to each other inside of this circle was just not, like, for me, for the first 2 years, I was like, couldn't believe it. Like, there's a saying in the military, like, nobody's more judgmental of a military guy starting his own business other than military guys. Like you'll see other military guys just cutting military guys down all the time.
Right.
And I would say the same thing is for hunters. Like you'll never see hunters are getting cut down by other hunters more than anything else. Like, if it's legal and you want to do it your way, like go and do it. And I'm not going to judge you. Like, I've talked on podcasts about guys who will message me and say like, look, dude, I'm an arc welder. I have 7 total days of vacation this year. I have 3 vacation days that I can devote to hunting whitetail with my boy. And I just, thank you for creating an app that is trying to help me minimize the amount of time that I have to spend away from my family or burning vacation days or whatever. Like, thank you for that. And then I'll say that on a podcast and guys will be like, if you only got 3 days to hunt this year, you just shouldn't hunt. Or if you've got to use an app to figure out like how you're going to hunt, you shouldn't be hunting. If you like, all of these people just, or like, I don't.
People have a hard time. People have a hard time removing themselves out of their own little bubble and placing themselves in someone else's for like a moment, right?
Yeah,
like, that's the thing. Like people don't, it's empathy, really, right? Is what it comes down to. It's like they have the inability for whatever reason when it comes to chasing deer or anything that someone is passionate about, right? Because I think you saw it in the military, right? I also saw it whenever I was in music. It was the same thing. Like if you wanted to see people cut people down and try to bury them, like other musicians would do it to other musicians because, this band is showcasing for these record companies and we're not. And it's just like everyone's so hung up on what someone else has and what you don't. You know what I mean?
And so focusing on themselves and their own problems or like how they...
Well, that's what I've always said. Like, people who want to solve very large problems, right, that are unattainable to solve or not, they don't have the ability to solve, but they focus all their energy. Like I see this all the time with people that I've known, through my life at different phases, right? They take up some big kind of Herculean task that makes them feel good about themselves, right? And it, like maybe it's like, I'm going to solve homelessness, right? Like that's my thing, right? And they uproot their life. Their life's a mess, right? And they're trying to solve this problem, right? That they'll never be able to solve. That they would be better off by just being like a stand-up citizen and contributing to organizations that are helping to solve that already in a meaningful way, right? And be a cog in it, as opposed to like, because the reality is that they're doing that to distract themselves or to busy themselves to where they have the excuse of like, I don't have time to solve my own problems because I'm solving this larger, like, global humanity problem, right? Needs my attention. It's like, no, the reality is like, get your house in order and then you can start to really help other people.
Yeah. It's really projection. It's really like people feel their own downfalls and they don't want to put themselves down or account for their own issues. So it's almost like this cathartic thing where they will attach, they'll get an idea about someone else, then just start attacking that person. And if they were actually do some introspection, they'd see that they're attacking themselves, but they're just putting it out there.
Yes.
And I see it in like so many different ways. I see it in marketing. I see it in dealing with hunters. I see it in social media whenever I'm doing trouble tickets. I see it like when I'm interacting with people online. And it's just so poisonous. And it really wasn't something I would expect out of like the do-it-yourself. Like, I want to go out there. I want to get lost. I'm trying to, a guy who's trying to cut a pound off of his backpack will complain at someone else for using a crossbow. Like, I don't care about a crossbow. If it's legal and you can do it, like, I don't care. Especially if the goal is to like put venison on the table. If you're just trying to like give your kids clean meat where it's not like, injected with all kinds of crap, and you've got limited vacation and it's archery season and it's legal for you to use a crossbow, go use a crossbow. Like, my life is jacked up enough as it is. Like, I need to fix 10,000 things with me before I need to fix anything with anyone else.
Right.
And like, I won't worry about fixing a stranger that I don't know online until I feel like, as you said, I have my own house in order and my shit is together. My shit is by no means together, and so is 95% of people.
Right.
And the hunting industry was a lot more catty and childish, and really like, it's a very. I don't mean feminine as in women. I mean feminine as in feelings. Like, to go online and complain about strangers, like, grow up.
I know, right?
Like,
I'm like, dude, I'm like, where does someone, right? Where does someone get the time to do that? You know what I mean? I'm like, I don't have time to like worry about a comment, or I don't feel strongly enough about anything that I see online to spend any time like writing something back about it. You know what I mean? Like, that's just me. That's just, you know what I mean? I'm like, oh, cool, whatever. You think whatever you want to think, man. Like, if that's how you want to rock, then
successful people that I know in life are not spending their time complaining. I don't know anybody who is performing at a level that I look up to and I say, I want to be like that guy, who is complaining about someone else. They're all focusing on themselves, and they're not trying to put things out there into the world. Like, it's such a strange, and I just didn't, I guess to get off of this, I just didn't expect that out of the hunting community. And then when I saw it, like, as rampant as it is, like, anybody can post anything and someone will start shit talking right away. Like, it's just,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter what it is.
It doesn't matter. It can be anything. They will find something to complain about because they hate their own lives, or they hate their own wife, or they hate whatever's going on for them, that they just can't deal with it with themselves. So they just want to complain about the world. So I didn't expect that. That was another thing that I didn't expect about all of this. And also, like, people just can do what they want to do. Like, this is a free country where you can just pursue your own interests, and you shouldn't have to be concerned with other people, what other people are doing, unless it's directly impacting you. And it's just, that's something I really didn't expect. But I mean, I could talk about this all day. I mean, I go ad nauseum.
I think too. I think too. Whenever you were talking about, we were talking about people, worry about this person has this and I don't, or this experience that I don't have, or whatever the case is. What I find is that the people who really have their stuff together are the most supportive of the people who are like making the attempt, right? Or who are having success, right? It's like, you kind of like, you kind of find each other, right? It's like, whenever, you have a buddy, or, people like, similarly, like people who follow the podcast send a message like, hey man, I listened to the show, killed my first deer. I'm like, dude, hell yeah, man. Like, way to go. I'm still sitting here with a tag in my pocket, right? It'd be easy to be like, be kind of like bitter about it, right? But I'm like, dude, that dude's having success. I didn't do much of anything, right? I don't need any, but I'm glad you reached out to me and told me, you know what I mean? Like, I'm stoked for you, And that was one thing last year whenever I had a killer year. And it was like all the guys who like I look up to that are killers, like every one of them sent me a message, you know what I mean? As opposed to being like, salty about it, or try to discredit what I did, or whatever the case was. There was none of that. There was nothing but like, dude, heck yeah. Like, way to work, way to get after it, way to keep, grinding. And it took a couple years, but it made it happen.
Yeah. It's just like such an anti-man thing to do. To go online and complain about strangers. But the other thing too about it is that I think is useful for people to conceptualize and I'm trying to think. Well, you've done jujitsu. You're in jujitsu, right?
Mhm.
You do.
Yep.
I mean, I rolled and did, military, what we call combatives
Mhm.
for like 10 years. And what you understand very quickly whenever you're doing those types of things, where if you're not prepared, you're not trained, you're not thinking, you're letting yourself fall short in any of the aspects that are important when it comes to mixed martial arts or to jiu-jitsu, and you watch someone else fail, you are never quick to judge them, because
Nope.
the judgment always ends in getting hit in the face or submission.
Yes.
And you've
Yeah.
been there so many times that you're just like,
Mhm.
I'm not. And then when someone wins, so the analog would be someone kills a buck, right? And then you get the list of people saying, "Oh, well, you did it this way, or you did this, or that's an urban buck, or it's an agriculture buck, or
Or it's on private land, or it's on whatever it is. Yeah. Yeah.
and it was public land." But in the opposite, when it's the military or it's jujitsu or it's something where the pain is immediate, like you will get hit in the face if you mess this up, you will get killed, whatever will happen immediately. And you watch someone else attain success, you'll never gonna be like, oh man, I can't believe Clint got that guy with an arm bar. Like, who does
Right.
arm bars anymore? Like,
Right.
like,
it doesn't matter, because all that matters is like
you got the
success. Yes.
Yeah, like, you got there. Like, I don't care how you did it. You got there and you had a goal. You specified it. Like you said, people have goals. You had a
Mhm.
goal and you specified it. And I don't care if it was luck. I don't care if that, like, you got that ankle lock or wrist lock or whatever, and it wouldn't have happened 9 times out of 10. You'll never say that to somebody who's successful in these combat sports or the military or anything where the pain is immediate. You know what I'm saying? Like Mike Tyson had a saying, like, everyone's a tough guy till they get punched in the face, right? Or everyone's
Right.
gotten a pain
Yeah.
till they get punched in the face, something like that. And that would change things very quickly if people thought about their own evolution as hunters, where we all do really dumb crap in the first 2 or 3 years. Like, you can always pick out the new hunters. They're like, they'll be on Facebook or something like that talking about, like, what type of wood should I use to smoke my clothes? Like, you could, of
Right.
course,
Right.
make fun of that person. Like, it would be
Right.
very easy. I remember having those thoughts. I remember thinking, like, I need to put my clothes in like pine needles tonight or whatever. And maybe
Right.
there are experienced hunters who still do that. I just exclusively focus on the wind. I don't give a shit what my clothes smell like. I don't get like, and again, that could mess me up later. Like, I'm not
Mhm.
saying that is the end all be all. All I'm saying is I've had success enough times just by knowing, if I know the wind and the thermal situation, and I'm thinking about that, and ask Johnny, he'll tell you, I throw milkweed 25 times in a sit. I'm constantly watching the wind and where it's going, where, like, my camera guy, Harry, who was filming when I was out in PA, he'll be like, dude, you go through like a thing of milkweed. Like, I've got like Tony, I don't know how to say
Tony
his
from Draw Archery. Yeah.
Sangelosi or Sangil.
Yeah. Sangelosi. Yeah.
Yeah, Sangelosi. I'm sorry, Tony, if I'm jacking your name up here. He sent me like this nice little thing for storing my milkweed on, because
Mhm.
I usually will collect a bunch of milkweed and put it in like a plastic bag, and then I'll put it in this like little thing that I order online, and I'm carrying it around, or I'm losing it, or it's my bino harness. Well, now it's right there on my bino harness here. It's really
Yep.
nice, actually.
Yep.
But I'm emptying one of those every 2 sits, whereas someone else might
Jeez.
last them all year. I'm serious,
Right.
dude. I overdo it. But I do know wind has screwed me so many times where
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't understand why. How did that buck smell me? Then you throw some milkweed and you're like, oh, that thermal started carrying. Like, just this morning, Johnny and I had like a great, perfect wind for the spot that we set up in. And I started getting worried because I watched the thermal start to pull my milkweed up the hill. But he's like, oh, no, I think you're good, Bill. Because it would go up about 10 feet and then it would turn around and come right back to us. So I was like, yeah, we're
Mhm.
good. So I'm constantly throwing milkweed. So if that is how I'm playing the game, right, it might work for me. I don't give a shit about what my clothes smell like. I hadn't
Right.
showered in 2 days. I'm not wearing a ton of deodorant. I'm stinky. But if
Yeah.
I know what the wind's doing, what the thermals are doing, right? But if someone else is asking a question about, like, does ozonics work? Or do I want to do this with my scent? Or, should I shower with scent-free soap? Just be like, hey, dude, yeah, I tried the scent-free soap thing. Really, all I focus on these days is wind. That's the right question, the way to answer that question. Or if you might be a great hunter who's like, yeah, I grind up pine needles and
Use
I
that
put them
spray
in a spray
thingy.
bottle.
Yeah.
I spray them all over my clothes. Okay, that's a great response too. Sure, if that works,
Right.
maybe it does. Maybe someone will figure out that does work. I'm not going to judge you when you have success with it because I know that I'm a dumbass. Like I just I'm not going to do that. But
Well,
you'll
not
see
just that, man, but whatever makes you confident. That's the only thing that matters is like your own personal confidence in doing what you're doing. Yes.
Yeah, and staying in the game, even if it's a lie, because
I tell myself a lie every time I walk to the tree that deer's going to come by. You know?
Yeah,
what I mean?
exactly. Stay positive. I mean, I think that's really Johnny is sitting next to me, and I'm going to let him get on here. I'm going to use the restroom here pretty soon, but I'm going to let him get on here and tell you, like, I think Johnny's, besides being deer, like, I think in his lizard brain, we all have lizard brains that control, like, when we get goosebumps or when we get tired or when we get hungry. I think Johnny's deer brain is a lizard brain is a deer brain. I think he's got a deer back there.
Right.
Besides that, right, like just his ability to think like a deer, he's always positive. Every time he's getting stand, he's thinking this is going to be the time. I've never, ever, ever seen him be like, it's not happening. This isn't going to be like, he's always joyful and in the moment and focused. And he's thinking, I've done what I need to do and it's going to happen every time he says.
Yep.
There's so much to be said for that because it's the right frame of mind to be in no matter what you're doing. And also when you're doing that, you're not complaining about other people. You're not chastising anyone. You're just there in the moment. You're having fun. You're deer hunting. You're enjoying nature. Like this morning. And it also the other thing, and I'm talking about Johnny, he's right next to me. It's kind of weird, but I'll say it again. He'll take like the little things that happen during a hunt and be like, oh, I learned this thing. The whole hunt was worth it. Or like, I plucked this little bit of information out. I'm not going to forget it. He journals. He writes it down. He's journaling it in the app. He has a journal at his house. Like, there was a gut pile west of us and a coyote came in there and barked at us. That made the whole hunt worth it. And he was right. It was fun. We had a freaking coyote this morning barking at us that was near a gut pile that he had left a couple of days before on the other part of the mountain. The coyote wanted to get back to the gut pile and it was barking at us. Made the whole hunt worth it. And then I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm upset I didn't see a deer. But Johnny's smiling ear to ear because we got to watch a coyote bark, and now Johnny can't wait to get out this afternoon.
Right.
Like that positive attitude is infectious. And if more people have that, the experience would be better, but also you'd be willing to go out under circumstances that you otherwise wouldn't go out on and just be happy to be there and be hunting because, we live in a country where this is actually a pastime that we get to enjoy as a leisure activity, whereas it's not the case in Russia or England or Scotland. You have to be rich.
Most other places, yeah, exactly.
Most other places, you have to have a ton of money or land or be noble, have nobility or whatever in order to go and shoot things. Right. Whereas Johnny's just happy he got to hear a coyote bark, and I'm like I get jealous of that, but I also try to emulate it because his positivity keeps me positive because I overthink things and then I get neurotic. Like this morning, I was like, this afternoon when we were setting up, I was like, I think we messed up these deer when we were in here, and I think blah, blah, blah. He's like, no, Bill. It's like, there's this here, and these deer probably aren't very pressured because we had to go way out of our way to get into this spot on this public that was butting up to private. And so as I was saying, like all of the reasons why this hunt wasn't going to work out, his response was always the reasons why this hunt is going to work out.
Right.
And that frame helps you, but it just makes the hunt more enjoyable because now you're having a good time with a buddy instead of thinking about all the reasons that you jerk this up. And realistically, 9 times out of 10, the hunt's not going to result in a kill.
Yeah,
so just
exactly.
have fun and be joyful and be there with the right mindset. And that positivity, I think, is why he goes out every time and puts it together and has a positive attitude, and then he gets positive results. And I think that I don't think we can talk about that enough as hunters.
Yeah.
Yeah,
100%, man. But speaking of positive, I'm going to let you go positively go to the bathroom.
Yeah, I'm going to
go. Before you jump, though, because we're going to talk to Johnny here in a second, let people know where they can follow you, Spartan Forge, all that stuff before we hop Johnny on. And then we'll do Johnny as the added bonus.
Yeah, we'll get a bonus with Johnny. I'll hop in here at the very end, too. Yeah, cool. We're at Forge.ai. If you message us on Instagram, Johnny can attest that I answer all of the customer service complaints on Instagram or Facebook. I'm dealing with the customer. So if you have questions or whatever, come follow us there. We're about to do a giveaway where Johnny and I are going to do a consulting session for you and look over your maps if people want it. So follow Johnny and I, and I'm at Spartan.forge on Instagram and SpartanForge.ai. So yeah, come check us out. And there's a 14-day free trial in the app. You have a code, Truth, right? So they can use that code at SpartanForge.ai and they can get, I think when you use the code, the app's like $41 for the year.
Yeah.
Like you can't,
can't go wrong.
You can't deal for that these days. So yeah, check that out. I'm going to let Johnny pop in here. Johnny, you want to take my seat?
Yeah. The best Johnny Carson introduction. Here we go. If you're familiar with like the old timer Johnny Carson, here's Johnny.
Here's Johnny.
How's it going on, buddy? Good, man. How you been, buddy?
Good. I thank Bill for talking all that good stuff about me, man. I'm all roostered up over there, boy. Puffed up.
You puffed up, huh?
That must be something. Bill's talking pretty good. He's a good guy. I love him.
Awesome, man. How you been, man? How are things?
Great. I mean, it's that time of year, November. I don't complain about anything. It's, the older we get, this time shrinks for us, and it's not valuable. So it's like just being out there and enjoying this, we're going to be older where it's probably not going to happen for us. It'll be here before you know it. So just, being in the deer woods is great. I love it.
Yeah. That's it, man. It's, this year, man, I spent more time this year, hunting than last year I killed quickly, so that's not a good comparison, but I think at the time that we're recording this, I think I've spent between Idaho and hunting Pennsylvania, I think I've spent 35 days hunting to this point. Yeah. So for a working stiff, that's not too bad. I mean, it's damn near killed me.
But hunting is great. It's not all about killing. There's times I say, I'm probably not going to kill. Maybe I'm doing something, just exploring a new area or wanting to see what's over the next hill. And when you put that tag on that animal, that's all done. It's great. We love hunting,
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it too, man. Because, especially whenever you're grinding through a season, because I was following along. You still have a tag for PA, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I was following along with that. It was kind of like watching what you had going on in between where I was hunting. I didn't have a lot of service, so I was just kind of checking out when I could. And it was actually helpful too, for me, because I was grinding along, and some days you see stuff, some days you don't, Yeah. And I was trying to, like, every hunt, kind of what Bill was saying about you before you hopped on, was trying to find like the one positive or something out of the hunt that I could kind of take away, right? It might be just a lot of the places I was hunting this year were new to me, like new setups to me that I hadn't ever hunted before, like I scouted before, but hadn't ever actually sat, And so it was just watching what the deer were doing. It's like, oh, okay, they do that here, right? Okay, I didn't think that was going to happen here this way, or it was just like little things like that to where it's like, yeah, maybe I didn't feel a tag, but man, I felt like this year so far, right, I felt like I learned a ton. I felt like this was like a big learning year because I got to do so much more in-season scouting than I usually get to do.
Yeah. And I, like Bill said, with journaling, you got time to sit in your tree. That's the best time to write down, because I say, like, I'll remember what happened or what I learned about this hunt, but you don't. So I always put in little notes, or what I would do is after like a 4 or 5 day hunt, I'll write like my final thoughts on that hunt, where I should be next year, historically. Where do I want to look for, weather's been hot, like PA, weather was warm. I need to get in a lower elevation as the temperature drops. I'm in how things in the hunting world and with this public land, and, it's kind of like yin and yang, but I feel like guys want to go far, but then the deer next to the road, then guys want to get near the road, then the deer go far. You almost got to be ahead of that curve sometimes. And it's always changing, but put them notes down in the app, or if you have your own journal, and that's, I think it really helps, with like you said, with your hunt. What did I learn from this?
Yeah.
Right in the picture. What was your thoughts on this hunt? What could I do different? What do I want to, and always ask yourself questions, why did this deer, and there's times I've been in a tree now, I'm filming my stuff with someone else, a cameraman, and it's, they're like, I'm asking them questions. They're looking at me like deer in the headlights, like you're supposed to, and the more I learn, Clint, the more I learn about these deer, the more I feel I don't know anything. And I do when I get with a camera guy that's been hunting Pennsylvania, he's only 25, but he can just like maybe had a few experiences where this works in this situation. He hasn't. I've seen it all. Like this could happen. It's midday. They could come out. It's raining. There's pressure. I've seen it all to where sometimes you get too much info and you're kind of lost. So I'm like, where do you want to go? And you looked at me like, what do you mean? What are you asking me for? But honestly, sometimes you get too into it and you know too much and it can be hurt you a little bit. You know what I mean? But it's also good to have that other opinion, whether a camera guy or Bill or one of your buddies, that's great about being in a community. Say, hey, this is what I saw. This is what I thought. Give them a pin, share this, on the app. What do you think? And that just, you get another person's perspective that isn't in deep, knowing that you bumped deer here or you've been watching this buck and this one moved in and there's a trail here and he just kind of glazes over the whole thing and he's like, just go here. Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes it's like, it's that separation from it is what you need to actually make a clear-headed decision,
We need something else to look at it.
Because there's so many things that we see or experience during a hunt, right, that we probably put too much credence in. You know what I mean? Like it has a bigger, we think it probably has less of an impact than we think it does, right? Like, so what you were saying earlier, or what Bill was saying earlier, where he's like, we kind of came in this way, and I think we may have bumped these deer, and you're like, no, we'll be fine here. You know what I mean? It's like, it's that having that voice of reason. It's always good to have a buddy that's that voice of reason to kind of talk you off the ledge, so to speak, right?
The part about Johnny is what he said today. We went into a spot which was primo, and I forgot to say this. I have to say it. We went to a spot as primo, and we jacked it all up. And I was like, we've jacked it up for the year. Like, we're done now for the year. And what Johnny was saying was, we've got these deer next year.
Right.
Yeah. Like, the next year, they're ours. Like, when we come back here, we're going to not make any of these mistakes. So it's just like, I was focused on like how we've jacked it up now. Johnny was focused on how we had made ourselves learning for next year.
For next year, yeah. So, that's funny you say that, because I was doing a lot of that, like, as I was hunting this year, where, not that I hadn't given up on the season, but I was already projecting forward to like scouting, right? I was already like, I scout during the season, but like I was already projecting forward to like postseason scouting, right? Because I was like, man, I learned this. I want to dive into like this, and this, based on what I've learned. Like, there's a couple things I think I want to uncover, because I think I know what's happening. I just need to confirm it now. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that, I get excited about that. Like, I mean, to me, that's what kind of always brings me back, is that something always new to learn, or something new puzzle to figure out.
Yeah. And with the in-season scouting, I kind of like probing, you just kind of go a little bit like this, whether it's on the field edge or whatever it might be. And you're only getting so much off of that probing. You got to draw conclusions, but like that, I can't wait to get in here in the winter time and just molest this area and know everything about it, is what you really need. I feel like most of the time when I probe in-season scouting, when I don't have a clear picture, I don't do as good. And I find that when I go into the winter and do the scouting, I was really balling it up earlier in the season, because I didn't know. Then you start paint the whole picture, like, he's bedding here, he's going here, this and that, and then you're like, oh man, I kind of messed it up. But there are times when, sometimes when you're in season scouting, sometimes there's like a clear picture. This is what's happening. You're going to have success that way. But I know, and I always talk about knowing and not hope hunting. And I did some hope hunting this year, just having a guy film me and not, when you don't know, sometimes you just jump in a tree and hope, which ain't a good thing. It's great to know and keep going till especially you get into the rut and stuff like that. That's then you pump skyrockets,
Oh yeah. Then at that point, it's like, it's Yeah, I mean, when you get into the tree, it's like you almost expect it to happen at that point,
Exactly.
there's I mean, I had a handful of I'm trying to think. There was only a handful of sits this year that where I felt like I was doing hope hunting. Like I felt like I was in the right areas like most of the time, or and I was still trying to figure it out as I was going because I knew I had a general idea of what I needed to do. I just wasn't 100% sure on like exact setups. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
what tree do I need to be in? I'm like, I'm in the right areas. And for me, it was a lot of like timing. Like, I wasn't sure of the timing because I've not hunted this area a whole lot. This is really the first year that I've hunted it kind of religiously, if you will. Like I put a couple like 2 or 3 hunts, I think 2 hunts in on it last year. And I think, well, yeah, that was it. I had 2 hunts on it like the previous year and that was it. But I never felt like I was like out of it necessarily. Right. There was like the best hunt I actually had was on a whim. It was like in October. And I was scouting an area and it was getting close to like prime time in the evening because I hunted in the morning. I scouted all afternoon, did like 7 miles or something like that. And then I was like, I need to get into a tree. And where I was at, the wind was wrong to actually hunt. I was in there scouting because I was like, I'm going to booger it up. I'll be back in like a week or 2 or whatever. And then, hopefully it'll settle down by then. And I just needed to get in there. I didn't have any other times. Like I need to get in here and see this area, right? And see if it's even worth spending any time in it. And then I was like, well, I can't hunt it because the wind's wrong. I was like, I got to get out of here. And so I jumped in, hopped out of that spot and just like basically beeline to an area, looked on the map. I was like, I'm going to just jump down in this bottom and find a place to set up here. And I did that. And sure enough, at like 20 after 4 or something like that, the deer I was chasing, like I saw him,
Mm-hmm.
It was like, and it was just total on a whim. Like, you know what I mean? Like that was literally like the only setup I had the whole year was a hope hunt. You know what I mean? Where I was like, I have no real reason to be here other than it's close. I can get to it and it's the right wind to hunt this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was it.
There are things, that you knew about that area to put you there,
Yeah.
It wasn't just like, and I hope a deer comes through. I hope it was like, a lot
Yeah, I
of,
mean, it was adjacent to some areas where I thought that this deer was spending some time or whatever, and so I knew he was in the general area, but it wasn't like that wasn't a spot on a map that I had looked at before or had scouted before and was like, yeah, I should set up here. That wasn't the case. But man, you're so the buck you just killed, dude. Let's talk about that, man. How did that shake out? That's a hammer.
Oh yeah, it was. I mean, these North Dakota bucks are like, this thing's like a brick. I mean, he's just like a big rectangle went through the woods. It's like, look at this. But I was out here 2 years ago. I missed one on a velvet hunt here 2 years ago, and Bill, as he talked about this cabin, it was his dad's that built, and he's been working on redoing it. So we come out in June, spent a week, Bill and I and a buddy of mine is a carpenter, and we worked our asses off for this week, so we can come out and hunt. So it was great. We still got some work to do here, but the weather here wasn't, normal North Dakota weather. I mean, it's usually 25, 30, Bill, and snow. And that's what these deer, their fur, I put like this deer, I got him hung, and I put my fingers in his fur, and it's like 4 inches. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Jeez.
Just all like nothing like, and I've seen them on trail cameras and stuff. I said, I just want to hang one up and I just want to feel that fur and just see that big puffy, because we've seen them here when it was 20, 25 below, and it's just like, they're puffed up like you would, like deer we don't even have, like, wow, I just want to get one of them down. So, we didn't have that cold weather. It was actually highs of 50 when we got here, maybe 540 at night. And that's kind of like our, at home, in PA, Clint, that's like your 60, 62 degree weather. I feel like that's warm for them, the 50 degree. But I feel like with the amount of deer that are here, they were still kind of, and Bill even said this is a good time for them to still cruising. And the local said, hey, I think it's just starting, especially with the warmer weather, it's starting to peak, looking for does. Had a couple spots in mind, just studying Spartan Forge for hours. I think, like, I'm hunting different areas, but the 3-4 hours the day before I got out of here, just dropping pins of places I want to check, find an ag, getting close to that, knowing there wasn't a acorn crop. So we got out here, scouted a few areas, and then you don't really have much to compare it to till you keep scouting and checking areas. They say this looks good, but is this good? You're going to need something to compare it to. So we got into one spot. We rode some roads a little bit, in the evening. And I always say you got to burn a day or two just to get scouting and figure something out. But we got out the first day at daylight, rode around and checked this spot, checked that spot, reading maps, checking my areas, watching the wind. And then when you got enough spots, then you can play the wind because, like Bill said, it's not a normal south wind. We've had that. But we found this place the day before we hunted it. Got in there and there was like fresh sign scrapes. They're looking for does. A little bench. And a lot of this area's got some thick, like Bill said, the whips, I call them, like the brush oak or whatever, is just, you get little open pockets and a lot of thick stuff. But we just found this little flat, this little bench, and we couldn't get in there to hunt the first day because of the wind. And then we could see we had a south wind, which was good for that area. We got in, and as soon as we got up the tree, wet, damp morning, we had a decent buck come right in behind us, right past, and Pete, my camera, said, there's a shoot, he always says to me, there's a big buck. So in my head, I'm thinking 140, like it was 120, but he's a big buck, big buck. I'm like, so I'm just like, he come right behind us and he's going like this, right up through here. And I couldn't get a shot. And I didn't quit looking at the horns. He said big buck. So, and he stopped, I stopped him broadside at about 35, 30. And I would just guess because I didn't even range it. And I took a poke at him. It was through some branches and stuff. And either I hit a limb or he really he ducked so much that he turned sideways. We slowed the film down, but it was a clean miss, but I wasn't worried about it, Clint. It was that was not a high percentage shot, and then when we looked at the film, I'm like, Pete, you said it was a big buck. It was like a 120, 150, I'm glad. I mean, it's not what I wanted, first day, right. But it was fun. So we on that south wind, we could hunt till 10 and we got out of there and we just did a little probing. We went up into an ag field and did a loop and we planned for the west wind, which was not that evening. It was the next morning we'd have a west wind. So we kind of adjusted our stand for the west wind, just kind of in the same area. And so we got up there the next day, parked our truck like a long ways away and hiked in. I don't like having a vehicle near me. The wind picked up. That west wind was, and we were leeward side a little bit, it was probably 20-mile-an-hour gust easy. And with the wind chill, it was 19, it was maybe in the 30s without the wind chill. But that wind was coming west, but we were leeward side, so we're still a little breeze to get up in a tree. And it was one of them mornings, like it was overcast, it was cold. I said, this is what we need to get these deer moving. And I just went through, like on Instagram on my stories, I said, it's, this is what we need to get these deer moving. I think midday. And, we seen a couple doe, and we got into like the 9, 10, and you get into 11, 12, and I look at Pete, he's up there, he got his hat off, and he's just like sitting there like, yeah. When you get to the middays, and you're just kind of zoning out, time to eat sandwiches and shit. But I just was, and then we got the clouds cleared, and I love it when the sun comes out, kind of like a high pressure, and the sun's shining, and with all the trees in there, you have a lot of shadows. And I look through the forest, and it's almost like everything's camouflage. I said, this is awesome. I feel like the deer sense that. It's like the sun overhead shining down. It's kind of like coming from the south a good ways. And so many trees in there, just like the depth perception's tough. And I just feel like this is when the deer want to be moving. These big deer in midday, nobody's hunting midday. And so I was ready, and I looked to my right and he was coming down the hill, maybe 60, 80 yards. And I just grabbed that grunt call and gave one, and I said, big buck. And he was out of sight. And I think the wind helped. As like Bill said, I really don't like being up in a tree and, especially back home, these bucks that got pressured are looking up, where's that sound? They want to hear you, see you, a couple of things they need their senses to actually commit to something like that, So But I think with the winds that were happening, he heard that grunt and maybe didn't have a good pinpoint on it, you know? And I think it was the one we found some scrapes and rubs. I think it was the big deer in the area. Like I said, his body just looked like a brick. Like, that's all I could relate to. Like, that was it. It was like a brick. I was like, look at this thing. I told Pete, but he come, after I gave the just one puff on the grunt, he come, and we seen him, man. And Pete was right over my shoulder. And there was a trail right here, 7 yards, Clint. And he got to about 10, and there was a clump of trees. And that's when I got my bow back, you know, and I just followed him. I didn't even stop him. He's on a dead walk, and just smoked him at like 7, 8 yards. It was so awesome, you know, and as soon as I shot him, I said, I smoked him. And it was like, we watched the film, and I'm like, he's like, Stan, let's go now. Let's go now. Like, yeah, we'll wait a minute. But it was like literally a perfect shot, you know, and he ran 75 yards and dead, but yeah, caught the top of his heart in that, but just like a brick of a deer. And I think some of it has to do with the fur, how thick and heavy that there it was. And it was the time for them big deer to move. It was 10-1, you know, full range on the app, you know, the machine just spits it out. Like, and that's a big thing I tell people. If you only have a few days, pay attention with what the app says, because it's there for a reason. Like, it's telling you full range, normal movement. That's 10-1 rifle season. This sucker's on it. So we need to stay here. And I do, like, going back into like early October, and that when you get that on your Intel tab, it's like, that's a big thing. Like, there's a lot of info put into that to spit this out and tell you to hunt that we don't even really know. But it was, we're going to try to get that video out probably around Thanksgiving. So
nice.
We should out. So, but it was, I've always wondered what them North Dakota with that, like I said, is just like, he's so puffy with his hair and shit. Like,
that's awesome. And then that feeling never gets old, does it? When you launch one through the Boilermaker, dude, and you know you just 10-ringed it.
Oh, just keep replaying. And he's like, you didn't even stop it. I'm like, it's 7 yards. What do you want me to, you know, I've had it here, probably not here, but like back home. And then I've had them where you ran and they take heading for the heels because they know what that means. You know, I'm like, you know, I'll 20, 25, like even 25 into 30, I'll put it front of the leg. I know I got 6-8 inches when he's doing that steady walk. Maybe I don't like stopping him. I'd rather just take a shot. Like I said, the one I stopped the day before, he's like he did something weird because
he hit the matrix button and was like,
that's what I said. I said, this was matrix. It's like his ass and his hindquarters went like this, honestly, horizontal, like, and he's like, you had to hit that deer. Did you hear the sound? I was like, my arrow was stuck in the ground, clean as a whistle. I'm like, no, I don't think I hit him, but it was an awesome hunt, Clint. It was, you know, and that's what, man, and it happens, you know, all the time, all the effort we put in, and it's like, time you see him and by time you shoot, you know, there's 15 seconds wrapped up, and that's what's great about it. It's so many lows, then you get that spike, you know, and it's like, I got to make you know, and you just got to make sure you sit there for hours and days and weeks, and it's like, this is it. I can't F this up, you know, and I like the pressure that you put on yourself, or as hunters, you know, hunting public land and stuff like that, you don't have a lot of opportunity, you know, so
that's right.
I'm glad it worked out. It's pretty awesome, you know, when it does.
Yeah, you know, awesome, man. Well, I'm glad you had success. I was following along with you, but I want to be sensitive to you guys' time, so you guys get your beauty sleep for tomorrow's hunt. You know, want to make sure
we got snow come.
You're good to go. You know, so get that snow. Get Bill a buck. Get him on a buck. You know, get one down tomorrow.
Think we will. Yeah,
nice. And but yeah, so I'm gonna let you guys get out of here. Bill, if he's in the background, is he there? There he is. Buddy, it was good seeing you, man. I appreciate you guys coming on. Johnny, I appreciate you making a cameo. And you and I will catch up one of these days here once the season's over, Johnny. But Bill, It's good seeing you, man. Thanks for hopping on. And just like what you're doing, man. I appreciate you. Appreciate all the stuff you do, man.
Thanks. Good talking to you. And hopefully we'll see you in the off season here at some point, meet in person.
Sounds good.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there too. And before I shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Osseo Gear, Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Genesee Beer. And until next time, we'll see y'all.